Good morning, guys. Today we're going to go through our notes on the digestive system. Okay, I'm going to skip through this because this will be your, you should have already done that yesterday. I signed it. We'll go straight into looking at the function of the digestive system. Okay, so it does three major things: digestion, absorption, and elimination. Okay, what those are, basically digestion is breaking down of food, and we do it in a couple of ways. We can mechanically, that means physically, tear, grind, pull food apart, but we also digest chemically, which is the use of chemicals, specifically acids and enzymes and biles that help break our food apart. The whole point of that breakdown, that digestion, is to allow it to be absorbed. If you have like a whole hot dog in your intestines, you're not going to be able to absorb that through the cell wall and into the bloodstream. It needs to get broken down into really, really small parts. Okay, so that digestion happens first, and it happens as soon as you put food in your mouth. The next thing is absorption. The whole point of eating is to get nutrients into the body. So once we get them into the stomach and into the small intestine, we're able to start absorbing them into our bloodstream so they can be taken around the body to the places that need them. Okay, so that is a transition from digestive system into our cardiovascular system because it's going into the blood. Then the last thing is elimination, which is just basically what we have left at the end after we've taken out everything that we can take out of that gets eliminated or removed or pooped out, however you want to say it. But we're eliminating food at the end of the digestive tract. It's kind of a little gross to think about it, but basically your digestive tract is a completely sealed system. So basically you have a hole in one end and a hole in the other, and we have a tube from top to bottom that's completely sealed off from the rest of the body. Okay, so that tube is the digestive tract. Okay, you should have already drawn a diagram, so you should have have that in front of you. It would be helpful. When I originally wrote this, I had some people add their notes onto the diagram, but I would encourage you to just do it in your own notes. Okay, so the first structure that food comes into contact with in the digestive tract is the teeth. Teeth are mechanical, right? So they're physically pulling food apart, tearing, cutting, grinding. Okay, so that's the first site, and that's a mechanical breakdown. Okay, so you have the flat, square teeth at the front, the incisors, those are cutting teeth. You have the more pointy teeth just to the side. Those are canine teeth that are there to tear food. And then you have your molars, semi-molars, and wisdom teeth all the way at the back. Those are grinding teeth because they're flat and they grind teeth up. Now, this process of biting, chewing, tearing, cutting is known as mastication. Okay, so that's what it's called. But also inside your mouth, it's not all mechanical. Okay, so there is some chemical breakdown that begins inside of the mouth, and that is done by the saliva. Okay, so you have salivary glands around your mouth that release saliva into your mouth, and within that saliva there is an enzyme. Okay, so that enzyme breaks down carbohydrates. It's called salivary amylase. Okay, salivary means it's saliva. Amylase means it breaks down a sugar. And the A's on the end of it, anytime you see an A's on the end of a word, typically speaking, it's an enzyme. Saliva also does something else. It lubricates the food to make it easier to swallow. Okay, so when your mouth is really dry, it's really hard to swallow, so the saliva adds some fluid and lubrication to allow it to get passed down into the back of your throat. Okay, so that's in the mouth. Let's look at the next part. One more in the mouth, which is the tongue. Tongue is really important for eating. Basically, what it does is your tongue moves food as needed from the front of the mouth when it needs to be cut and torn, to the back of the mouth where it needs to be grinded up. And then as you swallow, the tongue is pushing the food to the back. And the epiglottis, which we talked about in the respiratory system, basically closes over the trachea as you swallow so that the food doesn't go into the lungs and it goes down into your esophagus and into your stomach. Also, if you open up your mouth and have a look inside, if you have a mirror close by, you'll see a structure that dangles down. A lot of people think it's your tonsils. It's not your tonsils. It's called your uvula or ovula. And basically, it almost looks like a little punching bag hanging down at the back of your throat. That is also a flap. That's to stop food going where it shouldn't. But instead of stopping going to the lungs, it flaps up as you swallow, and it blocks off the nasal passage. So when you eat, your food doesn't go up into your nose. And again, I think we talked about this with the respiratory system. If you are laughing and eating, sometimes food can get into your lungs, into your trachea, past the epiglottis, and past the uvula and up into your nose. You might have seen videos of people, excuse me, with like milk coming out of their nose. Okay, it's usually fluid that's more likely to be able to sneak past. Okay, so once we have swallowed the food, it goes into the esophagus. The esophagus is the tube that runs down through your throat and connects to the stomach. It's about 10 inches long, and it is lined with smooth muscle. Okay, and we talked about this smooth muscle contraction. It is autonomic. It's not under your control. Your body does it when food is present. And basically, that muscle squeezes and pushes food down, squeezes, pushes food down. Okay, and that's smooth muscle. And it's pushing the food down into the stomach. We call that process peristalsis. Okay, when we get to the stomach is a hollow sac organ. And basically it has a flexible muscle wall which allows it to expand and contract. We talked about how the stomach expands to turn off your hunger. Remember we talked about that in the first semester. But 3 things are basically happening in the stomach when we're thinking about digestion. Okay, so the first thing is it's a place where the food is mixed with hydrochloric acid, HCl, and pepsin. Pepsin is an enzyme, and this is like the one enzyme that doesn't end in A's. The whole point of those 2 liquids, the hydrochloric acid basically kills bacteria, and it creates this really acidic environment where digestion happens more quickly. Pepsin is an enzyme specifically for digesting proteins. Okay, so that's what's happening. That's one of the first things happening in the stomach. We're destroying bacteria and breaking down protein. The next is it is a place where food is stored. Okay, it doesn't just because you eat in basically 3 major times during the day: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If there was no place to kind of store that food, it would all get passed into the intestines really quickly, and we would be less efficient at absorbing it. So basically, your stomach stores all of your lunch, which you consume in 15 minutes, and then it slowly releases it into the small intestine to allow absorption to occur over a much longer period of time. So it's really important that it has that storage capability. The next thing is that it just moves the food in. Okay, so at this point, when food is being moved into the small intestine by muscle contraction around the stomach wall, we no longer call it food. At this point, we call it chyme. Okay, it's C-H-Y-M-E, chyme. And so the food gets squeezed and pushed into the small intestine. Okay, before we get to talking about the small intestine, there are some other structures that influence digestion, even though food does not travel through them. Okay, so pancreas, liver, gallbladder, food never gets in there, but they are adding things in to the digestive tract where the food is. The pancreas, which you should know from looking at insulin, it produces a whole bunch of other enzymes, okay, that break down all of the three major food groups: carbs, proteins, and fats. Okay, so pancreas is really important about creating this enzyme cocktail that allows everything to be broken down. Because at this point, we've had some carbohydrate breakdown in the mouth and some protein breakdown in the stomach, but fats haven't been touched, and there's still a lot of carbs and proteins left. So the pancreas adds to this mixture. The next thing is the liver. Liver produces bile, which is this yellow-green fluid. And basically, this helps with the absorption of fats because the bile starts to break the fat up into smaller pieces that the body can manage. If you've ever seen fat dropped into liquid, into water, it all separates out. Okay, and the bile acts kind of like a laundry detergent. It's an emulsifying agent. It basically breaks it into smaller little islands of fat that can be broken down more easily. Okay, gallbladder. So after that bile is produced in the liver, it is stored inside the gallbladder, and then it's released as needed into the top of the small intestine via this little tract called the bile duct. Okay, please look at the diagram that you drew so you can see where these three structures are. Okay, so the liver and gallbladder are on your right, and the pancreas is on your left. But you should see that the liver is above the gallbladder, which is above the top of the small intestine. Okay, so let's get to the small intestine. It is up to 23 feet long, which is pretty long. Like if you can remember the classroom, basically that's from about the front of the classroom to the back of the classroom. Okay, so your small intestine is really quite long. And the whole point of it being long is it gives more opportunity for you to absorb those nutrients into your bloodstream. This is the primary site of breakdown and absorption. Most of the food that we consume is broken down and absorbed in the small intestine. Only a small amount of it happens in the stomach, and only a small amount of it happens in the large intestine. Most of it happens here. Okay, so you have all of those enzymes produced by the pancreas, as well as the bile, all mixed in together. And we get additional enzymes added by the small intestine. Okay, they're secreted from the intestine walls. They get added into that chyme mix to further break it down. Anything that isn't absorbed gets passed on to the large intestine. Okay, so let's have a quick look at what the inside of the small intestine looks like. Basically, if you look on the left here where my arrow is, it basically has this wavy pattern on the inside. Okay, these are called villi. Now, if you have ever eaten intestines, you will have seen this like ribboned, flared edge of the food. Okay, that's the villi. I know that I've had that with pho. Like if you've ever had Vietnamese pho and they put the tripe or the intestines in there, you see this wavy edge. Okay, and the whole point of having this wavy edge is to increase the surface area. Okay, so you can see where my arrow is. Basically, if this was flat across here, you would maybe get 10 cells between this point and this point. But because it's has that loop in it going down, we have a bunch more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We're going to be upwards of 30. Okay, so it really increases the surface area to allow that absorption to happen. Okay, so that's the villi. And then on the top of the villi, if you look at the focused in area, the loop has loops in it. Okay, so you have these little microvilli that go up and down, and this is the site of absorption. And again, it has that ruffled edge, the up and down roller coaster style edge to increase the surface area to allow more to be absorbed. Okay, it's really, really important. Okay, let's look at, let's do one more thing. If you look at the inside of these finger-like projections of the villi, there is bloodstream and nerve endings in there. Oh, sorry, not nerves, lymph stuff. Okay, that helps produce some of the enzymes and stuff and other things can be absorbed into the lymph system as well. Okay, so you can see that it has, basically it's coming in, the food's absorbed through that cell, through the microvilli into the villi, and then it gets absorbed into the bloodstream and then passed off. All right, so anything that isn't absorbed into the large intestine, in the small intestine, gets passed into the large intestine. It's called large because it has a bigger diameter. Okay, it's not as long. It's only 6 feet long, so it's much shorter. What's that? Almost a quarter the length, but it's wider. Okay, and that's why it's called the large intestine. The width goes from 1 inch to 2.5 inch, and basically the absorption that's happening here is water, vitamins, salts, and the rest just gets eliminated. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video. If you want to take a little break, and the second video, I'm going to be looking at how we care for it and some of the problems associated.